Right, ladies and gents, welcome to a new video. This will be a play and explain, but for the next 10 minutes or so, we're going to have ourselves a little bit of a debate between the pros and cons of range bet strategies versus polarized strategies. And I've kind of listed 3 points here that we're going to talk about before we get into the action, because I think this is a really interesting debate to have. And I want to give you guys a little bit of food for thought. So I've prepared a couple of sims, but I'm going to bring this one over to start with. And this is a single raise pot, button versus big blind. The board comes down ace king 5, and in theory your highest EV flop strategy here is to play overbet or check. And this is not what a lot of high stakes pros are doing, and there may be a real argument as to why this is not what you should be doing either. This will be up for you to decide. First point here is, said high stakes pros, if you go on to a smart hand of the world or whatever and filter for, say, the top 10 winners on GG of all time, you're going to see names like Barak, you're going to see Linus, Taisto Janta, Tobias Dubweiler, all top pros. And these are pros who play very, very simplified range bet strategies on the flop. And we need to ask ourselves why, because their strategies in theory are losing EV compared to the flop overbet strategy, which is technically, as I say, the highest EV strategy. Now, why they will be doing this, or one of the reasons why they will be doing this, is the second point. Knowing how to execute your strategy is more important than the strategy itself. What do I mean by this? If we look at the ace king 5 on the flop, let's just talk very briefly about how a polarized strategy works, and then let's talk about how this is quite counterintuitive and very inhuman, if you will. Polarized strategies revolve around leveraging your nuts versus your opponent's nuts. Okay, and on this particular board, it is very clear that the in-position player has more nuts significantly than the big blind. You can see we have double the amount of sets, nearly double the amount of 2 pairs, and a lot more top pairs. And of those top pairs, we have a lot more ace queen, ace jack, and ace 10, as you can see here. And these hands are, well, worth a lot of money. So the solver here is deciding to leverage its nut advantage even very, very early in this sort of spot, and just pile the money in and go for stacks. So if you picture a hand like ace king, what ace king is looking to do here when it overbets the flop is it's looking to fold out our opponent's pocket pairs so that they can't turn a set and win a stack versus us, and it's also looking to fold out our opponent's gut shots for the same kind of reasoning. We don't want them to turn their gut shot straight draw and win a stack. What it's also doing is it's leveraging, as I say, its super nut advantage here and forcing our opponent in the big blind to continue basically all of their king x and every single top pair combo. And the top pair combos in particular, well, and the king x to be honest, are all just extremely dead versus a hand like ace king, which is what our value range is built around. So what the solver is basically doing nice and early is it's manipulating its value, it's manipulating its range into the highest EV line possible, folding out hands that it's potentially vulnerable to, and forcing its opponent to continue hands which are just very, very, very dead. So this is how a polarized strategy works, and this is the biggest pro of using a polarized strategy. It's just you're manipulating things, you're folding out these hands that you're potentially vulnerable to, and you're ensuring that when the money does go in, you're going to win a stack more often. Now, the big downside of these polarized strategies is, as mentioned, they are really, really counterintuitive. Okay, so a polarized strategy by definition means you need to have a check-in range, and as you can see here, we need to check back 60% of the time. And a polarized strategy as well is by definition, again, polarized. So a lot of the hands that are going to start c-betting the flop already are not exactly intuitive. Okay, so we're going to look at some third pair here, like 7-5, 6-5, 8-5, all just firing the flop already because of their blocker properties. And that's kind of counterintuitive, because you're like, oh, why would I turn third pair into a bluff when I've got so much showdown value? And you wouldn't be wrong. You've also got a lot of just random suited connectors getting in here. So 7-6, 8-7, 9-8, 10-9, all just going ahead and firing. And then you've also got some like backdoor 3-card straight draws going in here as well, like Queen 4, Jack 4, Queen 3, Queen 2. Already, as I say, this is not easy for humans to execute. It's very difficult to understand why you would want to c-bet the flop with a hand like Jack 8 of clubs, for example, but then check back a hand like Jack 8 of hearts. Very, very difficult, and the frequencies are always on a real knife edge and being properly managed here. So the flop is already a little bit counterintuitive, and unfortunately this continues on the turn. If we just roll off an offsuit 2, when we look at the bluffing region for our opponent on the turn here, sorry, for hero on the turn here, you can see that, again, this is going to be really counterintuitive. If you have your bottom pair or third pair now that you decided to fire the flop with, you are going to fire again on the turn due to the blocker properties. If you have a hand like Queen 2, you're going to continue firing the turn sometimes. Pocket 3s, turning a gutter, keeps firing. But then you also just have a lot of pure air, like pure bullshit, that is going to arrive here and smash the bet button on the turn. Think 10-9, think 9-7, 9-6, 8-7, 7-6. 6-4 is a gutter, isn't it? But 8-5 is a pair. Yeah, so focus on this region right here. You can also see that our gut shots are actually slowing the fuck down now, which again is pretty counterintuitive. If you've decided to overbet the flop with Queen Jack, you're highly likely as a human just to continue betting on the turn, because you're like, well, I can always get there, I can always make the nuts on the river, so I'm going to continue firing. But this is not something the solver is doing in this particular spot. It is instead deciding, I have 9-6 of hearts, this is unbelievable, I'm going to fire the turn every single time. Which, as I say, it's not human, it's not easy. So this is a big drawback to these strategies, and this is one of the main reasons as to why a lot of the high stakes guys just won't enter these lines. They will go with a more simplified flop strategy that is then much easier to play from a human perspective on the turn. So let's analyze this. Let's look at the same board, if I can find it, with a range bet strategy on the flop. So we've got ace king 5 here. Instead of going for the flop overbet, we've now decided to just go 25% with our entire range, and now we're rolling off the 2 of diamonds turn once again. What I want us to pay attention to here is not so much the value is very straightforward once again, but it is the bluffs. Okay, so now on the turn, yes, there is still a small cluster of random low equity bluffs, but they're few and far between compared to the flop. And the bluffs here in this particular spot are just like a lot more intuitive to find. Okay, so now you're going to be finding Jack 4, Queen 4, Queen 3. These are gut shots. You're finding more of the Queen Jack, Jack 10, Queen 10 sort of region than you were before. Yes, there's still some pocket 3s and pocket 4s getting in there, but this strategy on the turn is just a little bit easier to execute from a human perspective, because we really don't have to find the 9-6 of hearts or the 9-7 of diamonds anywhere near as much as we did with the polarized strategy. So this is what I mean when I basically say knowing how to execute your strategy is more important than the strategy itself. This is the big upside to range bet strategies, in that they're a lot more intuitive and human to play later in the tree, and therefore this is why a lot of the high stakes pros will kind of default to these strategies, even though they are lower EV in theory. So without further ado, I've rambled on for a little bit too long. What we're going to do in this play and explain is we're going to focus on these range bet strategies. We're going to talk about the common pitfalls that you can fall into when you are simplifying and using a range bet strategy, but we're also going to talk about and hopefully illustrate a lot of the pros that are involved in these strategies, and why, as I say, you may want to simplify things down for yourself and play a little bit more like a human than going with the highest EV flop strategy and then trying to execute that later in the tree. So without further ado, hope you guys enjoyed. Let's get into the play and explain. Alright, let's have it. So the main focus of this play and explain is, as mentioned, going to be the pros and cons of range bet strategies. And one thing that we are going to focus on here is understanding how a simplified range bet strategy changes things later in the tree and how that is essential for executing the strategy. So a quick thing before we jump in, I'll tell you what, we'll do it whilst we jump in, is that people who tend to play range bet strategies, what they will do is they will tend to bet the turn a little bit too often. And the reason for this is that they want to continue fast playing all of their value, and they don't kind of counter the fact that they're arriving to the turn with too many hands in their range. So if you do simplify and say range bet the flop when you need to check back 25% of the time, even in theory, what this means is you're going to arrive to the turn with too much air in your range. And if you arrive to the turn with too much air in your range, you need to slow down in order to protect that check-in range that you want to have on the turn. This is something that people don't do a very good job of. And the result of this is that people tend to under-raise and overfold on the river. And this is something we don't want to do. So we're going to focus on this in this particular play and explain, hopefully at least, and try to find spots where we do want to slow down a little bit more with our turn C bets. So called for betting the king jack suited, I think relatively standard in those positions. On the right table over here, we 3-bet our pocket tens versus some kind of recreational, and we get the 7-6-5, which is kind of an interesting flop. I actually don't mind just checking this back here, getting a little bit of information from my opponent on the turn. Seeing as he is recreational, he will often tell us what he has with his sizing and how quickly he bets, and that will enable us to play turn and river relatively decently, I think. So on the turn now, we want to kind of fold out our opponent's overcards if we can, and we want to get called by our opponent's pairs. So we kind of need to figure out a size that's going to achieve that. I think something like 10.5 is going to be good enough here. Just want to fold out king queen. We are still going to get called by ace queen, but we also want to get called by pocket fours or threes and hands like that, 7-8 and stuff. So we get a check raise, which is interesting. I don't think we're going to fold just as yet, but this is really not ideal. But I think our hand can still make the nuts. It's still strong. We've also checked back the flop. So this is going to be interesting. Not an amazing river. That's half on the river. Don't think we're going to fold. I mean, why would you not just shove? Usually if recreationals don't shove the river in this kind of spot when it's quite clear that they should. Like if you have sevens, you just play for all of it, I think, more often than not. So we've checked back the flop. We've gone into this line. I think we're just going to call and lose, but all beat king jack. There we go. 10-7-6, unfortunately, whichever way we look at this, we're not going to range bet this particular board, but we can definitely have a betting range. It's just going to be our betting range is a bit stronger. Ace-8 with the gut shot and the backdoor flush draw, I think is going to be all right there. I think we can fold out ace-jack and things like that. In terms of exploiting recreationals, like this is why I kind of like checking in a lot of spots. You do induce a lot of things. I think I spoke about this a little bit in the last video. In terms of like a lot of the money from recreationals comes from forcing them to do silly shit. Obviously, this is some silly shit here. The key adjustment is to just not fold when you do get these lines. I think if he did shove the river, then I probably would be folding. But I think on the river there, like if you have pocket sevens here and you're slow played and then you've gone for the check raise, which is a fantastic line, I think you just shove the river. I don't think you just bet this weird and wonderful sort of half potish sort of size here. So I think it's highly likely that our opponent is just full of shit for this size, so we just make the call. Kings, I think, is honestly, it's not a fist pump getting. But I think because our opponent's 4-betting range should be quite ace-x heavy, like if we just jam and deny from that and get called by ace-king or queens, we're going to be doing okay. Wow, look at this. Oh dear, I did this last time. I just turned the video on and just won a load of stacks. Fantastic. I'm going to re-emphasize this again. Like, I promise you guys that when I do make these play and explains, I often just one take them. Like, short of one last time where I think I played for 20 minutes and then I ran out of disk space. But yeah, the YouTube run good is very real, it would seem. And I will emphasize again, it is not always like this. I don't just, you know, start playing and win stacks immediately. I promise you that. Sometimes I start playing, as I did earlier on this morning, and just lost 2 stacks immediately. So eventually we will get that happen, and I will post that too for the purposes of balance. But for now, we'll just we'll continue to run really good when we record videos for YouTube. Queen 10, we're going to fold to that sizing. We just get a terrible price, and our hand doesn't play amazingly out of position in a 3-bet pot. Alright, so I mean, this one is versus a recreational, but we will be starting with a range bet here on the flop. I like to do this versus recreationals an awful lot just because they play too many hands, which means their range is a lot more air heavy. And how we punish air heavy ranges is very often just by betting really often for a small size, and you just force them to fold 10-9 or whatever it might be. Okay, ace-jack, I think we're going to call 4-bet here. I don't think we necessarily need to go too big. Usually, and again, I think I mentioned this in the last video, call 4-bets, sorry, 3 bets from recreationals that are smaller are usually a little bit weaker. So ace-jack is almost value in this particular spot, which kind of feels crazy, but they will very much 3-bet like king-jack and king-10 and then always call. So I think we can, yeah, 4-bet that one up every single time. Getting the reg out of the pot as well is actually very nice. We were a little bit deeper, which means in theory we should be sizing up, but I don't really want to do that. I don't want to narrow his range too much here. I just want to play my nice and linear strong range versus a recreational and dominate him as much as I possibly can. All right, interesting. I mean, again, the pool seems pretty good, right? There's lots of recreationals here. We're just playing against them. Versus min raise, I just like to 3-bet. Versus recreationals, min raises again are just really weak. So I'm just going to 3-bet everything and just take advantage of the fact that they've got a weak range, and then we'll start with a range bet on the flop. Ace-high board, I'm not going to simplify to range bet on. Ace-high boards are very rarely range bets. Basically because like we have hands like this, or we have hands like pocket queens, which don't really want to put any money in because they don't need any protection. Queen on the turn, I'm going to polarize and just check. I don't think we need a small delay c-bet here. I don't think we want to delay c-bet pocket 8s. Opponent checks very quickly on the river, which is usually not going to be strong in this particular spot, and therefore I think we can probably value bet the nut queen and get called by something like queen 6, maybe a 10-8, maybe a 9, maybe an optimistic pocket 6s, who knows. Generally speaking, though, versus quicker checks on the river, that means you're going to get check raised less, because oftentimes if someone's going to check raise you, they're going to think about betting. So if you're going to get check raised less, you can value bet wider, because you don't get punished enough, basically. Queen jack off will defend with a call. And we get the 10-4-3, our opponent checks. I think our hand can go either way here. I like to use small sizes here and stab relatively often, but I think Queen Jack actually just plays really nicely in a check. in the, like, when the turn comes a queen or a jack, I think my opponent's going to be very aggressive. And if I do bet small, I don't think I'm going to fold out like the hands I'm dominated by, like king queen or ace queen or ace jack. So I think it's just going to be nice in this line. Similar reasons for the turn. It's just too strong to bluff, and too shit to value bet quite clearly. And then on the queen river, our opponent takes a little bit of time and checks again. So this is just going to be a very ace high heavy range. It is really a question of how greedy we want to get here. Whether we want to carve out an overbet and put the max amount of pressure on. But I think generally speaking, I just like doing this. I think it applies more than enough pressure to ace high. And we do get the snap fold from Buddy. So like basically here, once it does go check on the flop, check on the turn, and he does check the queen river, I think his range is just so weighted towards ace high that I just think I could overbet and be greedy, but then he's got quite an easy decision with a lot of his ace high and that he just snap folds. Whereas I think if I go medium, he might have to consider calling a little bit more, and I think it's a tougher decision for him to make. And that's how often I'm going to like work out my sizing. Basically, I'm looking to force hands into tough decisions. Okay, so ace 10 8 here. It's a 3-bet pot, but we are very much going to simplify to range bet this one. This will not be a range bet in theory. It's quite a dynamic board that can change a lot. However, he is meant to play like infinite raise, infinite check raise on this sort of texture, and I don't think that's going to happen as much as it should. And therefore, I think just keeping it simple and range betting there is going to be completely fine. King 8 looks like a nice c-bet here with like the backdoor flush draw, 3-card straight, an overcard, potential bluffs later on because we can pick up equity. I just like to use like a 40% here out of position on these kind of boards. Don't like to piloting too quickly just because we're out of position. And whilst I would love to pile the money in with jacks, the board can change quite dramatically on turn and river, and we can't fold out a lot of our opponents' higher equity hands. Turn king is going to be very good for our range. The question here becomes the sizing. I think something like medium-ish is going to be okay. Yeah, I'm going to go for the 40%, and I'm going to put the king 8 into a check at least sometimes. But I think betting it is also fine. He's going to have to continue 4x still. He's going to have to continue some gutters, and so on. So we do get the time bank raise. I don't think there's too much to be done here versus the raise. I think we're just going to be folding. We can't really improve at all. It is going to be relatively strong here. I'm going to continue hands like Jack 10 there, flush draws, King X of spades and so on, but King 8 off with no ability to improve, I don't think we need to defend versus that. Alright, ace 8-2 is about as dry as it gets. I say ace side boards you don't usually range bet, but I think you could make the argument for the driest of dry ones like this. It was pointed out to me on my last video that a lot of the mouse clicking that I do was picked up by the microphone as I've like changed my little setup around a little bit, and I've just realized that I've just been clicking the mouse incessantly for the last 14 minutes here, so apologies for that. I'm going to try to, I don't know, keep my hands up here and only move the mouse when I need to. Just a terrible habit of mine, I guess, but apologies if you picked that up so far. I will do my best. Let's have a look. So 6-6-5 versus a recreational. Again, let's just go range bet here and live that particular dream. On the turn, picking up a pair, I think we just want to check here. I think we could bet the turn and fold out a lot of ace high. Not really that incentivized to do it at this point. We'll keep his range nice and wide, and then we can bluff catch the river, I think is really nice. So we get the absolute snap check of all snap checks, which means my opponent never considered betting. He is tighter. I'm really tempted to just do a like 2 big blind bet here, but I think he's the type, because he is quite tight, that would just snap check threes here, so I think we'll just go showdown. Interesting. Interesting, like, as I say, that he's snap checked the river there, never considered betting that. So it gives you an idea as to his profile, like he's just definitely really trappy. So we should often bear that in mind when we do play against this opponent. Interesting thing when you talk about timing tells, like they are very reliable, of course, but like any read, you know, it's like live reads and things like that. You can't put all of your decision making process into one said read. You've got to see the full picture. All right, so we go nice and big versus a Limp from Greece, a little bit deeper. I think we'll go half pot here. I want to disincentivize overcards a little bit. That's fun. How do we get the max? How do we get the max? I think if we check, we're relying on him to bet a 10 or bet an underpair, and I don't think that's going to happen. So I think we just keep betting ourselves here, because I think he'll call a 10 or an underpair. And we'll just play for it all. On the river, we are looking to stack an 8, basically. On the ace, I'm not really worried about, you know, getting max value from a 10, because I have the nuts, but also he's going to fold a 10 to any size on the river here anyway. So we're just looking to stack an 8. Hopefully it's not quads or aces. It's range bet on the table to the right here. Okay, so turn is more connected. Our king X is already devalued a little bit on the flop. It's devalued even more on the turn. We are going to check back like a lot of king X. We're probably going to polarize to mainly a 10 on the turn here. So we can check back quite a lot. And if we check back quite a lot, I don't need to bluff a hand like pocket sevens, which is so high up in my range. And a really easy fold. And we'll move on. Interesting if he checks again on the river there as to whether we bluff and for what size we do. But we didn't have to think about it because it didn't happen, I guess. Ace 10 we will do as a frequency here, sizing up a little because we're a touch deeper. But we won't do it this time. So my RNG up here, high is a bit more passive, low is going to be more aggressive. There I was just doing a 50-50. Oftentimes with my RNG, if you've not seen a video of mine before, it's just really straightforward, like I am, just like 50-50 or something along those lines. It's very rough. Okay, so 8-3-2, we are going to play like a 40% here. I think ace 2 is a very comfortable c bet here because our opponent has to defend shitloads of ace high that we dominate and lots of overcards, so I think it seems completely fine. King Queen 4 here, yes it's a recreational, but we will just range bet this one as well. Again, keep it super simple. On the turn, with the amount of showdown value I have, I'm not going to get in the habit of just bluffing ace high versus a recreational. I'm just going to start with a check here. And on the king we just check our ace 2. And we run really well again. Not really strong enough to like check raise, get it in or anything like that, even with the ace of diamonds here, but we do want to bet very big. I think something like 13 to 14 here is going to be sweet. Get caught by a queen, get caught by a king, I think. And ace 2 just goes to showdown here comfortably. So not a range bet on the flop, but I do like to just size like a B40 here. Myself, I think it's just one of those nice little like hybrid spots where you can still bet really wide, but also you kind of respect the fact that, you know, the turn can be a flush completing or something like that, and kind of kill you. Do we pure 10s here? We might, but I'm just going to throw in a call. I also time banked for a long time pre-flop, which indicates like a bit of indecision. So I don't usually like to like 3-bet when I've done that, because I might end up getting paranoid and then think, oh, they think I have a timing tell, they 4-bet me too much, and that may or may not be true. Pocket tens, we will call pretty comfortably. And a7 we will fold. Okay, so opponent checks back on the turn, which you should be doing, yeah, relatively often. I think we can block here pretty comfortably, get caught by a random 8, a random 7, a random 9. And I think that's going to be better than checking and facing a bigger bet and then not really loving our life. Wonder if we block 3-bet as well. Could be an idea with our double straight blockers. Flatten the ace-5 because of the recreational in the big blind who we want to play with. And I mean, again, yeah, we're just running really pure. Sure you're all bored of this now, just me making the nuts and... Well, I say it's not the nuts, is it? But me making strong hands in videos and just winning stacks endlessly. Simon, when will you show us a losing session? They will come, I promise. Might even happen now. Might be it. That might be the doom switch. So 9-8 is sort of a whatever defend here. 200 NL rake. It's still pretty whatever. We'll see what Mr. Sea of Magic does with his endless time bank here. Definitely had a tough decision. For this, I'm not going to wait this long and fold. So that can be my RNG. And we will just be folding our 9-8 on the flop. Nothing to be done there. King 9 will be a little bit of a looser open. Yeah, it's one of those thresholdy ones. We'll go for it every now and again, I think, with just regs behind. Okay, I'm just assuming a misclick because I believe this is a reg at least. So yeah, let's call and see a flop. And that ain't the one. Here we go, look. We've got one. Right, so we're going to play range bet on the flop here. Hopefully our opponent calls, so we can talk about the turn. Okay, I'm just going to check back. I'm not putting any money in it just yet. Alright, 6. So, mistake that a lot of people make here with a hand like ace-jack is they just go, I've got ace-jack on ace-king 7. I am going to always fire the turn. Firing the turn here with ace-jack is going to be fine, right? Another mistake that people make is they just use like a small overbet and they'll go like 9 here. You want to go really geometric and polarize as quickly as you can because you do want to win a stack. Now, in this spot, ace-jack is one of those that does want to go both ways. So we are going to put it into both lines. This time it's going to be a bet. But you do need to check these hands back in order to protect that checking range of yours, especially when, as I say, you've used a range bet strategy on the flop and you have infinite jack 6 and hands like that. Okay, on the river. So our opponent's range at this point on that turn is going to be very top pair heavy. Some stubborn king X and so on. We are going to play jams. I don't think ace-jack is going to be a jam, so it's just a question of do we want to carve out another size? And I think we do. So jam on the river there I think is going to be probably ace-9 plus, ace-7 plus, probably, there or thereabouts. But I think on the river, I think we'll tag this hand and look at this at the end because I think it's a really, really good one. I think on the river we can carve out another size because he's going to have like ace 3, ace 2, ace 4, ace 6, ace 8, ace 10, which have to defend. So I think we do want to size up. We don't want to just do something medium here when his range is just so weighted towards top pair. So I think we can carve out pot for basically this ace queen and ace jack region of hands. Flop with 6-5, I can go both ways, and I will go both ways here. I think I want to polarize actually on this sort of board, so we'll go with that. 6-5 definitely plays really well in the check. Okay, queen turn. Generally, I'm going to have folded out quite a lot of my opponent's queen X. Generally, like a lot of my bluffs have picked up equity here. So I think like bluffing 6-5 here is going to be really beneficial. I don't think the queen is as such where it's hugely devaluing to like pocket 4s or 10-8. So I think pot is a fine size to use there. Other bluffs are going to be like if we just stab the flop with like jack 5 of spades or something like that. I think obviously that's going to be a really nice bluff on the turn, but I think something like 6-5 here with a plan of bluffing clubs is a pretty nice one to find. In terms of my stab, I think like the board is sort of relatively interchangeable. Like again, you can do whatever you like here in terms of your stabbing strategy. I think polarizing is fine and just going I'm going to bet a 10 for the pot sort of size and immediately put you into trouble with like just 2 overcards. But you could argue for every size in the book here, I think. Alright, aces will just open and king jack we will free bet. Wonderful. It's got to be a fish, isn't it? Oh, the avatars are back. I've just realised stars have fixed the avatars. Well done to them. Sad that they broke them in the first place, but we're back. Yeah, so that ace jack hand, wherever it's gone, what I think I'll do at the end is just utilize a little bit of a sim and a bit of a node lock sim, see how well we played the hand, but also I want to kind of illustrate like the adjustments that you should be making from the GTO based on a simplified flop c-bet strategy, i.e. a range bet. So what you should be doing here, as I say, is checking back a little bit wider than you should. Wider than you usually would if you just played 25% with like 75% of your range rather than your entire range. So queen 9-9, we're going to start with a range bet here. Keep it really straightforward. We face a small raise. That is a tiny raise. I think it's fine. I mean, it puts a lot of hands like just ace 5 into sort of semi-trouble, I guess. We're not folding a pair in a million gazillion years just yet. So 7-5-4 here, this is a board I do definitely want to split and have a checking range on. I think king queen can probably go into both lines. I think with the diamond it's going to be pretty nice. I think we already put like ace queen off into some kind of trouble on the flop here. It's kind of whatever, but it's probably okay. On the turn with 5s, how do we want to do this? I think like stab really often is going to be nice here. So like versus like a really high frequency flop check raise, there's just a lot of like just random overcards in his range that we can fold out here. We face a rather large raise on the flop with king queen. We'll just be folding. Interesting to think about what he's raising here, whether he just fast plays 4s. We get check raised twice. Yeah, I still don't think I'm folding a pair, just because I can hit a 5 and it's going to be the nuts. It's close. It is close, but we will go with it. I still think it's natural to have like king jack, jack 10, king 10, maybe some spades in this line. His sizing kind of perturbs me. I guess it makes sense with a 9. Are you going to just barrel king jack on the turn, or are you going to be fancy and check it? That's probably the biggest question here. Maybe a little bit loosey-goosey from me on the turn with the call. Just range bet this board and get it in and hope for the best. So it is a very dynamic board here, but our opponent is just fucked, really. He just has to just take king jack and get it in. King queen's going to fire the money in and we'll flip. Maybe he raises some ace queen. Jack 9 that floats. Then we get called. What calls? I just think this is so weak. Like, if you have 10s, most people are just going to raise 10s. I play really polarized here and do a bit of both, I think. Yeah, I think I'll actually find this. Basically, I just want to pick a size here that folds out like ace queen. Do I want to fold out ace queen? Yeah, I think I do. Fold out king queen. 8, 9. Yeah, makes sense. Get called by king 10. Win a stack from queen jack, I guess. Okay. Block is out as well, it's nice. I mean, it's fine. For me, I would just get it in on the flop. Like, I'm not wasting any time here. I'd just pile it in with king queen, but that's just me. Alright, so Mr. Quads for Days, who looks very recreational, decides on a min 3 bet and then half pots this board. We are going to call. And I mean, yeah, the turn getting, I think, it's obviously grim, but it's probably fine. Like, if I'm going to bet fold like ace queen and ace king, then it's going to be good. If I'm not going to fold bet fold those hands, it might not be, but I totally missed his sizing here. Well, pot's not ideal. Yeah, I guess we fold for pot. I'm not going to lose any sleep over that. Just an unknown character. Can I jam? No, jam's outrageous, I think. What's his range here? Very ace-x heavy. Not much else. Yeah, I think like 150 is going to be really nice here with trips. I'm going to talk about this in a second, actually. Jam's kind of outrageous just because, like, he will have a better 5. And I don't want to narrow myself too much, and it is a 4x pot jam. And he can have plenty of strong hands in this line. 6-5, ace-5, 10-5, pocket 6s, and so on. Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. It's a weird spot. Still think just small. Like, what do you do with 2 5s here, mate? Alright, 6. Sometimes brute force is the way. Oh, shit. Really didn't believe, did he? What a call. So let's just play this one out and then we'll talk about it. I think this is a very nice bluff on the turn. And we're going to bluff the perceived outs when we get there, I think. Going to fold out a lot of his draws on the turn as well. bluffing a 10, bluffing a 7, bluffing a queen, I think. They're going to be the cards we're going to bluff. And we'll have to bluff very big, because I think once he does call on the turn, it is going to be quite strong. With the 5-3, so interesting, I was a little bit unsure on the turn size here. Sorry, lots of spots, lots to talk about. So on the flop, we can definitely go either way here. Ace-6-5, again, not a range bet. Ranges are too wide. It's an ace-high board. But decent frequency of bet, don't get me wrong. If I had to, gun to my head, estimate a frequency, 75-25, I would say. Let's play the jacks out and then we'll come back to this, because this is really interesting that our opponents found the lead here, which is really good actually. Most people do not lead these kind of textures, but you definitely can. Turn size, he's basically saying I have 5-4 or a 4. I can stack all of that if I river a jack, so there is a real argument to calling here, but I don't think we have to. I think we'll probably, that's a really interesting hand. Probably mixing there seems okay, legitimately. 10-8, do I want to squeeze? I'll go multi-way with 10-8, I think. I'm in so many hands, I'm really sorry, I wanted to talk about this hand. Let's see if he folds. Mr. Satin, or however you say his name, Sat1370, is like just a really good reg, to be fair. Doesn't seem to play that much, or I don't seem to play against him that much, but I'm fairly sure he plays very high. But just really creative and just endlessly puts you into tough spots like he just did there. Played a fair bit against him at 500 zoom, and he is really tough, to be fair. So, hi mate, if you're watching, I think you're very good. Sure you don't need me to tell you that. Ace King will see bet. Could probably simplify this as well. 2x is not that much of a factor from the cut-off. It would be a little bit more of a factor from the button, I would say, but I'm worried less about 2x than I am 3x. 10-8. Alright, he's disconnected. I think I probably will defend versus a min-raise, but a min-raise, a min-bet. Yeah, I mean, what a price we get, eh? This guy intrigues me, so I think I'm going to flat, keep him in. Also deep with him, which I think is nice. That's not a bad board for a flatting range, actually. I think we can carve out a little bit of lead here. Again, sort of like immediately what do you do with like ace jack off or ace 5 here? That turn's only going to get better for me, I think. A lot of my bluffs have just picked up even more equity. What am I trying to do with like 9-8? Oh shit, I timed out over here. Oh my god, I'm going to time out over here as well. I guess this. Panic and bet 67 because I've run out of time. There you go, it gets through. Right, the 5-3. Fuck me. So I think we can see bet, right? And in terms of like, if your frequency is very high with your range, then you can see bet very merged anyway. Just because of that, you know, picture that slider going up towards range bet. Like if your frequency is high, then these kind of hands are going to get in there. My opponent is going to float just endless overcards anyway with the backdoors. So, sorry, I'm getting so distracted here, but doing my best at least. It just feels like I always have a hand. Good problem to have, I guess. But so yeah, he's going to like comfortably just flat 10-9 and 10-8 and all this kind of jazz here, so there's a lot of value to be had. On the turn 5, so what I was mentioning with this is I was really in between with my sizing, whereby on the one hand I think my opponent's probably going to have a bit of an advantage in terms of the 5x. That may or may not be true. On the other hand, I like have a lot of ace king, ace queen, and an advantage there. I was thinking about small, but I don't think small really makes a lot of sense because I'm not really incentivized to keep betting like with a 6 or with pocket 7s. So I think I I decided on polarize and just say, okay, I'm going to go for like ace queen, ace jack in that region of hand on the turn. 5x mainly betting, I would say, but also going a little bit into like a check call, I think is also going to be good. But I think if you have a 5 here, you're mainly going to just drill it. Queen, jack. I mean, there is an argument to bluffing, but it's just such an ace high heavy range. I'm not going to try and bluff that. I will check call though, for what it's worth. Just in case he just shows up with like a 7-8 that he checked twice and now bluffs the river because he got 8 high. But I think that's where the EV is with this particular hand. Like, it's an unbelievably good bluff catcher, blocks loads of value, unblocks quite a lot of bluffs. Yeah, I think we'll just lick it in and move on. That's spicy. That is spicy, to be fair. I'll put him in my book for check raise. I think this guy YouTubes as well, right? I will eventually get to finish talking about this hand, but again, we're in 2 more hands, so fucking hell. Right, I'm going to set our next big blind. Oh shit, I just automatically folded whatever that hand was. What was it? King 10. It's fine, I would have folded anyway. I wouldn't, but tell no one. I'm so flustered. Right. Fucking hell. Queen king. We are going to check. We can see bet the flop and get caught by a lot worse, but on the turn it's kind of too good to bluff. Ace 10 5. This is going to be a nice one for our like range bet strategies that we can talk about. Let me get back to that 5-3. There you go. Similar spot, right? So on the turn we are going to polarize, but again we are going to mix in some check with ace queen, absolutely. But I keep rolling aggressive numbers, so we will not be doing that this time. King queen I think is good enough to call. We beat the bluffs, dominate the bluffs very often, have some showdown value. Let's see how thinly you value bets now, shall we? Yeah, not this time. Yeah, 2x pot the turn with ace queen, feels nice. And then eventually, yeah, so we finally get to the 5-3. I'll have a look at what the guy had on the left in a second. So we do bet the turn, and then on the river, in terms of the sizing, considered jam, but jam just feels a little bit outrageous in terms of where my hand fits into that. Like, I think I'm potentially just narrowing myself to just being coolared by the better 5 or something even better than that. Just picking this size here to fold draws, well, not draws, fold ace high. He definitely calls draws twice. I think on this particular river we'll check. I actually think we'll win like a decent amount of the time here. We still beat like 8-7 and some random flush draws that are going to call twice, especially for that quick, and I don't think I'm going to fold out his pairs all that much. Yeah, wasn't folding that. What's going on? Maybe it's the heat. Like, it's very hot here. So yeah, on the river, like when my opponent calls, I don't think with this particular hand in my range I want to play all in, but I could definitely make the argument for all in built around like 6s, ace 5, that kind of region, pocket 5s perhaps, but it is a really minimal range. I'm not even sure that we even need all in here. All ins happen a lot when the nuts is fairly imbalanced, and whilst I think we have more nuts than him, I'm not sure how much nuts we have in this particular line. Aces I suppose we could put in this line because of the 5x, but yeah. So maybe not all in. Anyway, our other size I decided on being very polarized, just because when Buddy calls flop and turn, it's not like he's sat there with 6-7 anymore. It's very much just an ace, so I think we need to go really, really big to target that region of hand and force an ace to be pretty indifferent. And my value region on the river would probably be something along the lines of like ace queen plus. Ace 10, ace queen, ace king, that kind of region I think is about right. And then yeah, we got called by king 6, which is, yeah, ambitious, definitely. Kind of close on the turn. Feels like a fold on the turn, to be fair, but fair enough. And I mean, on the river, it's as good a bluff catch as any, I guess, but I'm not sure how easy it is for me to overbluff there, but who knows. The other hand was, well, there was a couple, wasn't there? Where was that king queen? So Buddy had 7-10, which seems fine. It's a completely fine way to play his hand there, I think. The turn call with king queen might look a little bit optimistic. Probably is a little bit optimistic, to be fair, but I think my opponent is still going to float the flop really wide, as evidenced, and then he will stab the turn relatively wide. So I think king queen, as I say, dominates that bluffing region pretty hard. Still has a lot of showdown value, so I think it's going to be fine in a check call. Can always, as I say, river a king or a queen and win as well, just in case. So yeah, I think that one's pretty nice. Fucking hell. Right, all action. Looks like we won a few buy-ins. Very nice, feels good. Let me jump out, and then I'll jump in and review the, was it ace jack hand from before, and then we'll call it a video. So see you all in a sec. Right, so just to finish up, chaps, the ace queen hand I played in this video I think is actually the best example of this rather than the ace jack. So let's just replay this one for you guys and then talk about what we've wanted to talk about in this particular session, you know, range betting and then slowing down on the turn as a result. So just to replay the hand, ace queen, we open the button, big blind calls, we elect for a 25% strategy with our entire range. Of course, the highest TV strategy in theory here is to polarize the flop, but we decided to go with a range bet small as a simplification, as mentioned at the start of the video. So one of the common pitfalls that people fall down on, as mentioned at the start of the play and explain, is that if you do simplify your strategy on the flop and range bet a board that, strictly speaking, is not a range bet, this means your range on the turn is going to be more air heavy than it should be. If your range is more air heavy than it should be on the turn, that means we can't bet as often, and that means we need to check back more. As it turns out, ace queen, as I say, is one of those that can go both ways. Decided to roll the RNG on this one, rolled a magical low number and decided to find the bet for the 2x pot on the turn. But I prepared a couple of sims just to help you guys illustrate this point, and if you take nothing away from this video, maybe you take away this point at the end. So what we're looking at first of all is our sim with the custom 25% strategy on the flop. Okay, so we can see that if we wanted to play 25% or check, in theory, our range wants to check behind 37% of the time on the flop. And this is fine if you want to do so, but I think if you probably are going to play a checking range on this kind of board, you may as well just polarize, right? There's no real need to play bets and checks when you're going to c-bet so small. I would prefer to either c-bet your range for small, or if you're going to play a checking range, do something more polarized and play the theory orientated strategy. So in the theory-led sim, theory with this particular flop strategy, we go bet call, turn comes down to 2 of hearts, and the highest EV size is actually pot. On the turn, I elected for 2x pot, whatever. So I put 2x pot in, and this is the strategy that is spat out. So let's just have a quick look at this. We can see that ace queen is basically puring it on the turn and is looking to go for 3 streets of value. Same goes for like ace king, pocket 10s, pocket 5s, pocket 2s, and so on. And very similar to the original sim we looked at right at the start of the video, you can see the bluffs here are relatively intuitive, with some low equity pure bullshit being thrown in there. So you can see these gut shots going in, jack 4, queen 3, and queen 4, a little bit of king 4 and king 3 in there as well, relatively natural to find. Of course, as mentioned, there are still some low equity bluffs in there. You're just going to pure the 7-6, 8-6 and 9-6, which isn't necessarily easy to find, but of course there are going to be less of these in this particular strategy than there were before. But the point is, I want you to, as I say, look at the frequency, right, the frequency is 32% of bet, right? But that assumes that we've checked back 37% of the time on the flop, which we weren't doing. So if we bring you over the second sim, which is node locked for a range bet on the flop, and we've also node locked our opponent to defend theory orientated. So just to talk on this, like, a lot of people don't actually attack range bets as much as they should. This is often because it's difficult to know if someone actually is range betting or not. People often don't know how wide they're supposed to attack as well. A lot of people just don't choose to play exploitative strategies as the defender on the flop, so they'll just play the theory anyway. So with this in mind, I think this kind of reaction to a small flop c-bet is probably going to be more accurate than what the solver would spit out if we decided to let it do its thing versus a range bet. So we node lock this one in, and on the turn, I actually do need to get rid of that lead because no one's leading an offsuit 2 on the turn. That is very simply the solver just cheating. So when we do check, you can see, when they do check, you can see that 32% has now become 21.5%, and this is based on what we were talking about, right? It is just the fact that we arrive into the turn with way too much Jack 8 suited and Queen 8 and all that sort of jazz, where these hands were, if we just pull this back up on this particular spot, these hands you can see are not always in there, right? There were frequencies on the flop. So if you don't have as much air in your range on the turn, you can bet wider for value. But if you have more air in your range on the turn, you can't leave that turn checking range unprotected. So we can't actually bet as much, and we have to slow down much more often. So just paying attention in particular to ace queen, you can see that ace queen suited and ace queen off are actually checking back really often here, as opposed to the original sim. Have I lost it? Where you can see ace queen was actually pure betting. So it's subtle differences like this that I think you want to account for if you are going to simplify your flop strategy, right? It's no good having a simplified flop strategy if you don't understand the consequences of your actions later down the tree. And what we absolutely cannot afford to do is just to go, well, you know, we go in the original sim, we know, we put our sizes in, and then we just go, ace queen, pure bet the turn, congrats, and then move on, because this isn't actually what our range is, okay? And if we do check back a range that is just put very simply too weak on the turn, what's going to happen is we are just going to end up, where is it? Flicking between two sims is horrendous. If we check back a range that is just simply too weak and too air heavy, what will often happen is on the river, we're not going to have these kind of hands in our range that want to call or want to raise the river, right? If we just pure bet ace queen on the turn, we're now missing river raises, right? If you don't check behind like all of this ace x on the turn, then you're not going to have enough call, right? So it's all of these factors that you have to bear in mind when you do simplify on the flop. Okay, you have to consider what's going to happen later on in a tree and kind of cover your backside a little bit. So this is the point I wanted to make with this. Like, if you do use these simplified flop strategies, you do need to play less aggressively on the turn and slow down a little bit more. Turns out we kind of nailed this one. Rolled the low number on the RNG and bet, but definitely decided to check back with this one as well. Hence we rolled the RNG. So happy fucking days. Right. I think that was a pretty cool video. I'm pretty happy with that. Please, guys, let me know what you think in the comments below with how the video was structured, whether you like this kind of mix of like a play and explain plus a little bit of like a theme or a bit of theory mixed in there as well. What else did I want to say? Apologies for the last 10 minutes of the play and explain. Like, it was just seemingly I was in a hand every single second. Got a little bit sort of flustered where I couldn't keep up with the action, timed out a little bit, and tried really hard to explain everything but couldn't. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you all on the next one. GG, have a good weekend.